All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, so glad to be talking today, and I am especially happy to have friend of Halitics, friend of Hal, Chuck Pennacchio, with us this afternoon here in DC. Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
All things considered, I'm hanging in there, doing all right. Yeah, just battling every day to sort of make sense of our crazy world and to decide what it is I can do best. As a social justice activist as well as an academic. What can we do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one I struggle with as well, grapple with. And I don't think there are any obvious answers, are there? I mean, I work with a lot of activists, and we're all trying to do something and hoping we're doing something, but the answer isn't clear.
I would actually offer this. Make decisions in your own personal life that are consistent with your values. And I've been having this conversation with a number of friends who identify as social justice activists, and they all admit that they just give themselves over to the corporate world. They do big banks, they do box stores, they do, big tech, and they just throw up their hands and say, that's just the way it is. So my response is, oh, great. So on the one hand, you're fighting fascism with your pro-justice work, and on the other hand, you're feeding it in your own personal behavior. And I think that that's very disempowering to do that, to live that sort of contradictory life. And so I'm very conscious of where I shop. And I think we've talked about this before, every dollar you spend is a political decision. And I think more and more of us really need to see that and understand that we have agency over our own personal lives, much as the outside world seems so difficult to negotiate. But we do make personal decisions, and every dollar we spend really does make a difference, I believe.
So you see the consumer as having some real power. I'm skeptical of that position. I'll be honest with you, Chuck. I think each little purchase is just such a blip that the multinationals don't even notice if you buy from them or from some other purveyor.
Right. But once you get 1% of the population, 2%, 3%, 5%, 8% acting collectively, now you're making a huge difference. And that's, every individual act is important. To borrow even Bobby Kennedy's, this is Bobby Kennedy Sr.'s, his speech that he gave in South Africa back in the 60s. Every pebble that you drop in the pond creates a ripple, and if everybody's doing the same thing, it creates a wave. It creates a tidal wave of change, and it seems insignificant as an individual act. But honestly, if it becomes your mindset and you're in connection with other people, one place that people can go to make decisions, it's called Better World Shopper. And it tracks corporations and companies and shows how socially responsible or irresponsible they are, and they actually give them grades for their level of social responsibility with regard to the climate, with regard to, are they pro-union, anti-union, did they give back to the community? All these different measures are tracked in this document, this book. It's online. You can get a hard copy called Better World Shopper. I just think it's empowering. I don't use Amazon ever. I never shop at Walmart. Walmart is basically raping our tax system. I think many people know this. They deliberately underpay their employees, and then they get them all these welfare benefits. They're literally their business model is to milk the welfare, is to milk the tax code, and that's part of that, how they do their business and how they keep their prices so low. But by patronizing them, you're endorsing that kind of a business model, which is very destructive. And of course, they're anti-union, and they 6 of the 10 wealthiest Americans are members of the Walton family. They live behind these walls, right? They live behind these moats, and they're destroying our economy. The billionaire class is where we have to target our energy, and this is the way you go after it, I believe.
Are you familiar with a group? And we'll get to the top. I invited Chuck on just so listeners know, by the call, viewers know. By the way, you can call in at any time, 240-242-5646. I'm going to urge folks as well, if you haven't yet done so, please please subscribe to Halitics. We are seeing the numbers continue to tick up, but it's a slow process. We'll get to the stories, but this is fascinating. Chuck, are you familiar with an organization in Maryland called Don't Shop on Tuesdays? Has that crossed your desk at any point? I'll explain them to you.
Yeah, please. I'm happy to hear about it. Absolutely.
So I have a friend who, actually a couple of friends who really have pushed this group. And honestly, like I mentioned, I'm skeptical of the power of individual consumers. I kind of favor a government model, government that enforces, which we don't have, of course, antitrust laws that would break up the Walmarts, that would break up the Amazons, that would force them to be good corporate citizens, and also would enforce zoning laws and the like, so you don't have these giant, big box, ugly, stores that take up enormous space outside of communities that aren't convenient to public transit. So I prefer the government, people acting collectively, but I understand the argument that you're making, and I'm not saying it's wrong at all. What Don't Shop on Tuesdays idea is, just tell people don't purchase any items on Tuesday, and at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, the retailers will see their sales decline on Tuesdays in any event, and that will cause them to, I assume, act differently. I'm not really clear, but at least it will demonstrate the power of consumers when they act collectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think one of the tools, another really concrete example of this is the Montgomery bus boycott, right? The Montgomery bus boycott back in 1955, 56, that brought the Montgomery bus system to a halt, brought it down to its knees, almost crushed it. And this was the collective action of African Americans who were being oppressed, right, in the South. And Montgomery was the target city by King and others in the civil rights movement. And they broke the back of the Montgomery bus system and required that blacks take their seat wherever they want on the bus, right? If at that point it was the back of the bus. And if there aren't enough seats for white people, get off the bus. That was the policy of the bus system. And they changed that through a collective boycott. So I think our economic power really is greater than we realize. I mean, I also believe in shopping local, shopping independent. I go to the one independent pharmacy in my neighborhood. I patronize small restaurants, independent restaurants. I mean, small things like that really do add up. I buy it. If I'm buying books, I go to Powell's bookstore. There are other great, booksellers other than Amazon and so forth. So there's so many things that you can do, and it really does make a difference. And if we're going to change the trajectory of the billionaire class taking us down further and further, because right now they've won, right? They've won. They've captured our government. They've captured our judiciary. They've captured now the federal government, the bureaucracy. And right now Trump is leaning into ending mail-in balloting. I mean, my permanent address is in Pittsburgh. I'm living in DC because I'm here on a work project, but he's taking away my vote, right? He would be if he gets away with this. And all the gerrymandering, this bogus mid-decade gerrymandering that's happening in Texas and other states. And now how do we deal with that? So, I mean, the assault on what remains of our democracy is all this is it all intersects. All of this activism intersects. It's not just the political, it's also the economic. It's also, where you spend your dollars, where you spend your energy.
Well, Chuck, an argument I think that strongly militates in favor of consumer action, especially if we can unite boycotts and the like. And on this program, Halitics, we focus on the genocide in Gaza committed by Israel and the United States. One of the real fears, it seems, at least from the news, from the responses by Zionist leaders, is they're terrified of some type of economic boycott, sanctions, right? They want to outlaw people who call for boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. So obviously they view the power of the consumer to impact negatively on Israel as quite strong. And we've even seen that. I did report how some Israeli farmers are concerned that olives and other Israeli products are not moving in Europe anymore. They're losing significant sales. So that seems that does make your argument, I think, more powerful. It shows the strength of it. It's evidence in favor of it.
Well, this is where Ralph Nader made his chops, right? Unsafe at any speed, right? He took down the Corvair, this car that was dangerous, this super dangerous car, and he brought attention to that, and he basically took down a car company, and through consumer power. So yeah.
All right, so real quick, the news continues incredibly grim and only worsening. 3 Palestinians starved over the past 24 hours, according to Democracy Now! You can see the headline there. 56 more killed by Israeli attacks. Netanyahu is apparently in the process now of occupying the entire Gaza Strip, which I kind of thought was already occupied. I mean, Israel controls the entire region, so I'm not sure what occupation looks like differently than what we have now. Do you, Chuck?
This is ethnic cleansing is another way of describing genocide, but the campaign right now is to eliminate all Palestinian Arabs, all Gazans from the Strip entirely. And, much as people laughed out loud when Trump was saying, that this is great real estate, we could turn this into a, Riviera on the Mediterranean, he wasn't joking. This is really who he is, and this is what he's leaning into. And for Netanyahu as well, we can talk about Putin as well. The whole thing of just sort of playing into what Trump wants to hear, real estate deal, that really brightens him up. His sons have been in real estate. This is what they're doing, making real estate projects and deals across the Middle East. And this is very much connected with the U.S. continuing to look the other way, greenlight Netanyahu's behavior and the Israeli destruction and starvation campaign. And now another bit of news came out that the State Department isn't allowing any visas to be issued to any children under any circumstances to get out of Gaza. The children have literally been cut off by the one small lifeline that they had.
Do you think that's because, I'm speculating here, but it seems plausible, Israel doesn't want any Gazans to survive because it knows that if they do, they will be sworn enemies and certainly prepared, I'm sure, to die themselves to kill as many Israelis as they can after their population has been completely or almost completely eradicated.
Well, they're doing everything they can to find relocations, states, nations. So I think most of the remaining residents of Gaza or citizens of Gaza are going to be relocated to other countries. I don't think they're going to kill every single last one of them. I think what it's going to be a major relocation campaign, which is also another definition of genocide, right?
Well, it would eliminate the Gazan population, would just simply disperse them. But, as awful as it sounds, and it sounds absolutely horrific, anything to save lives. I mean, at this point, I wonder why, and we hear this argument a lot, but I know Arab countries are themselves under tremendous pressure. There's a lot of overpopulation, poverty in many of those countries. Why aren't they taking in the Gazans? Because my sense was Israel and the United States don't particularly want them to, but you're saying, no, that would be a welcome in Jerusalem.
Well, these countries are being, these are mostly authoritarian countries, right? And you just bribe the ruling class, the dictator, and that's really what this is coming down to. And a lot of these are third world or third party countries that are taking in immigrants from this country that are being forced out of this country, like South Sudan. These are places that are brutal, absolutely brutal human rights records, and they just don't care. So, the United States in this sense is very much in sync, I believe, with Israel in terms of, the Trump government and the Netanyahu government. These are all fascist governments, fundamentally. We can talk about a definition of fascism. I think that should be very helpful for people. But this is a concerted campaign It's about imperial conquest. It's about carving up the world. And I think it's going to come right down to just whatever the bribe number is, whatever the dollar figure is, how much per person that will it cost us to send to your country. I think it's just going to come down to a dollars and cents equation.
I mean, there isn't much time. People are starving to death. People are dying, in numbers that are probably much, much higher than the reports, Chuck. I just don't know that there's really even the opportunity now to save the millions that maybe there's we just don't know. I mean, Doctors Without Borders, Doctors Against Genocide, others on the ground are talking hundreds of thousands of dead at this point, child amputees and the like. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just concerned about that.
Yeah. Well, the Israelis overnight just called up 60,000 more reservists to occupy Gaza City. I mean, they're going to just clear out Gaza City. This is a purge campaign. One of the other things that doctors have talked, I track with Mehdi Hassan over at Zateo. He just interviewed 2 doctors, Palestinian American doctors from Dallas, one of whom has done now a 3rd tour, the other one a 2nd tour in Gaza, and they said that children are so badly starved that they can't even consume food any longer. I mean, they're just diminishing just right in front of them. It's horrifying. There's no doubt about it. So,
this is a crime that, in my view, clearly rivals the Nazis, is what we're observing right now. And you mentioned relocating the Palestinians. I mean, the Nazis did talk about relocating the Jews to Madagascar or some other location before they began their final solution. And it's heartbreaking to me. I mean, you mentioned trying to do something, and I think people do feel, I certainly feel hopeless in the face of this monstrous crime.
Yeah. I mean, my attitude is radical hope, which is to say that my eyes are wide open. I see what you see, but I also see beyond this. I have to see beyond where we are right now. It's the only way that I can move forward with a significant amount of mental health, just to deal with the current situation and not be paralyzed and not be given over to, uber cynicism. I have to believe that there are good people in the world, and there are people who are reaching out and trying to help, and we have to work with them. And I think is it Catherine Clark, the only Democratic party leader, finally a party leader came out and called it genocide. I think that now that's 11 members out of 535, if I'm not mistaken. And ironically, Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of that 11.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think also Massey, maybe. He certainly voted against Israel on a number of occasions. Yeah. From Kentucky, the other Republican I'm aware of, I believe, who has done that. I don't know who else has. AOC said it once, but she rarely uses that term. Catherine Clark did say genocide, and she didn't back down when questioned. But she also, in my view, and I don't have the clip here, I was disappointed in her answer because she tried to, it sounds like, make excuses for Israel. Well, they were attacked on October 7 and, kind of trying to put what Israel's doing in context. There's no context that justifies this.
At this point, I know no one in my life who doesn't see this as genocide. I mean, honestly, I talk to my students of mine, conservative students, and they've come around to this view. And the same thing with the fascism. I don't know anybody who doesn't actually see it at this point outside of our members of Congress. This is just, it's stunning to me how tone deaf, how decidedly irresponsible they are in terms of failing the public to see it, to say it, to define it, and ultimately to defeat it. Because unless you see it, unless you see the genocide, unless you see the fascism, you can't strategize because you don't understand what you're dealing with. And people are just dumbfounded when Trump makes this statement or that statement, and it's one distraction after another. But what folks need to understand is we have to center in on the larger purpose of fascism, which is acquiring, consolidating, and expanding power by any means. And that's really fundamentally what it is. And it's using those three core principles that we talked about before of white, in our case, white supremacy, religious nationalism, and I'm not going to stop at Christian nationalism. There's nationalism that permeates almost every major religion, and they become allies of the Christian nationalism, including Jews, including Protestants, including just all the major religions. And then you've also got, of course, the state corporatism, where Benito Mussolini started the conversation, which is the merger of state and corporate power, which is to say that the corporate billionaire-driven world has captured all of these institutions, as we said at the very top. So, and then all the ugly ideologies that spill out of that: misogyny, xenophobia, stealing elections, just flat out lying, corruption, deal making, insider trading, all of that, racism, all of that spills out of those three fundamental tenets of fascism. Again, white supremacy, religious nationalism, and state corporatism.
So there's so many different places we can go with this. We did invite Chuck on, especially because of his residency at this time in the District of Columbia, and we're talk about what Trump is doing in DC. And it's very consistent with what you said, Chuck, expanding power in every area by any possible means. And we're certainly seeing that in a federal, or maybe even better described as a Republican or MAGA takeover, with troops from red states coming in to patrol the streets of DC. We'll get there in just a moment. I just wanted to ask you one thing, because you mentioned, I used to talk a lot about Ukraine. To be honest with you, it's kind of the space in my head that I had for Ukraine has kind of been occupied to a significant degree by what's happening in Israel and specifically Gaza there. But what was your thought that you wanted to share with respect to the Trump-Putin alliance or negotiations on Ukraine?
So, there are some lessons that we can take here from the 1930s, right? The appeasement policy that Neville Chamberlain adopted, and it was not opposed by the British. In fact, it was endorsed by FDR. People don't know this or remember this, but when Chamberlain came back from Munich after having negotiated a giveaway, a handover of the Sudetenland, right, which was the more German ethnic area of Czechoslovakia, and Hitler said that'll satisfy me. I won't want to go to war. And of course, that simply fed the fascism. This is the way that fascism works: is the more you feed them, the more insatiable they become. It's just the exact opposite of bribing people not to do something. By bribing them or giving in to them, it actually strengthens their determination to push further, and their evaluation that you are a weak soul, that you are a weak individual. And that's the way that Chamberlain was a businessman. That was his background, similar to Trump. And Trump basically handed everything over to Putin, and Putin was able to get away with it by just flattering Trump and saying, "Oh, I would not have invaded Ukraine had you been president back in 2022." And for Trump, that was satisfying. That's all. That's really, Trump was happy. He thought that.
Let me just jump in real quick, because I have been much more harshly critical of the pro-Ukraine, if you want to put it that way, position that the U.S. government under Harris Biden took. And I think that the United States deserves a lot of the blame for the war in the first place happening and then not ending it early. What would you say the U.S. should be doing differently? What would you propose? Because, I mean, short of a all-out war with Russia, I don't see what we could do except try to negotiate some kind of a peace at this point to end the slaughter there. It's a terrible, deadly war.
Well, you don't negotiate a peace while you're fighting. I don't believe. Those are not the circumstances under which you're going to achieve a peace. I mean, we have to move to an immediate ceasefire. I mean, we've been talking about that in Gaza as well with Israel, which Israel has said, "Oh yeah, we'll do a ceasefire." Well, no, we're not going to, after all. And so this sort of manipulation is something that Putin has learned from Netanyahu. I believe that, these guys, they look at each other, they learn from each other, and their own learning curve goes back to, as we've talked about here, goes back to the French Revolution and the behavior of Robespierre and establishing all these revolutionary institutions like, kangaroo courts and secret police and secret military and so forth.
And also the use of Orwellian use of language, such as the
Absolutely.
Committee on Public Safety, which was a, executioning group. I mean, they just wrote up names of people to be guillotined. So.
Absolutely. We're just being gaslighted here. The West's hands are not clean. I mean, we've talked a little about the origins of the problems, with Russia. We made a huge mistake at the end of the Cold War. The United States made a commitment that we would not expand 1 foot beyond the existing NATO lines. That was Jim Baker, right? Secretary of State, made that pledge to his Russian counterparts. And of course we did. And from a Russian perspective, they felt encircled. And from their perspective, I can see that. I understand that. I can appreciate that. But the fact is that Putin did invade a sovereign country. And that's a line that you cannot cross without having some consequences. So that's one line that I do draw. But, Russia does need to be brought into the larger world of nations that need to behave, and that includes the United States. We need to step up our game. We're not terribly civilized the way that we're treating ourselves, our own people, and the world. Is just that we, in my mind, we have to get back to, this is going to go back to December 10th, 1948, when the world adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And if we center our thinking on that, those 30 points, those 30 human rights, and expand them and update them, I think we can potentially bring the world back together, and also I think we have to create some sort of a more rigorous, much more than the UN, a system of global government that would enforce these basic rules of engagement, these basic rules that respect sovereignty, that respect the human rights of individuals. That's where we have to get back to, I believe.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying. I really do. And I think what you just described is a vision, right? A better world, a vision of a better world. And what I've been talking about in this program is the need for the Democrats, if they want to regain power and if they want to govern in a way that benefits the American people, is that they lay out a vision for a better America, for a better life for working people. You said, Chuck, and I know this is a long-winded question, but I'm really kind of glomming back onto some of the things you said. You said, and I agree with this 100%, that most of us, the great majority of us, do see what Israel is doing as a genocide. Most of us do see Trump's takeover as fascist. Wouldn't it behoove politically the Democrats to speak much more in a unified fashion against Trump's pro-Zionist or pro-Israel policy, however you want to describe it? Wouldn't it behoove Democrats to speak much more in unison, the way Mamdani, for example, is doing in New York, about the costs to working people of Trump policies? Are they failing to do that? And if you agree they are, why aren't they able to present a vision?
Right. Yeah. The gorilla in the room is AIPAC, and all of the American Israeli money that floods into campaigns and politics, and the Democrats and the Republicans they're all petrified. They're petrified that they're going to be primaried from the right in the case of the Democrats. And the Democrats are already far enough to the right, and yet here we are. And so money really is corrupting not only the system, but the thinking and the mindset of these politicians, who are, at the same time that they're running for re-election, and that's their number one priority, is to win the next election. And if that's the way you look at the world, what do I need to do to win the next election? And let me talk to my consultants. Let me talk to the pollsters. Let me take a look at the fundraising. Let me take a look at the money that's coming into the pockets of my opponent, maybe in a primary or a general election, and that's going to guide how I vote. As opposed to what you said, which is voting in the direct interest of your constituents, which is what Mamdani's doing. And, people like Hakeem Jeffries, shame on him, Senators Schumer and help me out,
Gillibrand.
Gillibrand. I mean, shame on them. I mean, for not endorsing the Democratic primary winner for arguably the second most powerful job in the United States, that of mayor of New York City. And Mamdani has landed on a winning message. You said it. He says New Yorkers are struggling. We need to make this city, and it applies to everywhere across the country. We need to make life more affordable for people. And that's food, it's housing, it's healthcare, it's education, it's so many other things, transportation, childcare, all these issues. If we don't address them, then we're not going to win. And I say we, that's got to be the mindset of the Democrats. I'm not a partisan Democrat. I admit to being a registered Democrat, frustrated Democrat. That's for damn sure. But yeah, I fully embrace Mamdani. Look, he is an updated New Deal Democrat. That's what he is. You know, people are going to throw democratic socialist, whatever, communist. That's the target. You know, that's what the right wing is doing. What he's doing is he's addressing people's basic needs. And that's what FDR was doing fundamentally in the 1930s. He had a racist blind spot, which is why we didn't get to universal health care in the 1930s. But nonetheless, let's take that premise, let's take that foundation of principles that were embedded in the New Deal and updated in many ways with the Great Society and bring it into the present. You know,
I think it's an incredibly powerful and winning message. And, you know, you bring up FDR. Mamdani has said at least once, but I think on a number of occasions, his favorite mayor, the greatest mayor in the city of New York, was the little flower Fiorello LaGuardia, who I believe was mayor when overlapped with FDR, although a little bit later in FDR's 4 terms. And LaGuardia was incredibly popular. I believe he was a Democrat. I'm not even certain about that, but he was very popular among Republicans. My grandfather was a pretty rock-ribbed Republican. He was a successful businessman, and, you know, he saw Republican, you know, small government, lower taxes. That was what he wanted because it was good for him and his business. At least he perceived it. He's still really, really like LaGuardia. He loved that he was a person of the people, a man of the people, that he didn't, you know, present himself as an elitist. He never forgot his roots in the immigrant communities. This is the winning message, it seems to me, for Democrats.
100%. And you actually landed on something there, maybe indirectly, but LaGuardia was a man of the people. The Democrats are afraid of the people, fundamentally. I mean, most Democrats are. They're afraid to meet them where they are. They're afraid to speak the language that will connect with them because they can only hear the jingle of money, you know, in their coffers, in their campaign treasuries. And the consultants who have really unfortunately captured so much of our politics. And the consultants are going to work both sides of the aisle. Both the consultants are going to be always preaching caution, caution, caution. And that's not what people need. We're in crisis. We need leadership. And it's really, really, really hard to find that leadership today. Very hard to find it. Mamdani is an emerging younger person. He's 33. He's got a great style of presentation. He's not thrown off message. No matter how much stuff is thrown at him, he stays on message. Yeah, he's really good. He's really disciplined. So much we can learn so much from him and other like-minded people. But yeah, there are a handful of members of Congress. I think of also Summer Lee, Ayanna Pressley, Rashid Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. So there are a handful of Democratic members, but of course they're often attacked by the Democratic establishment because they're doing better fundraising. Why are they fundraising more than the establishment? Because they're speaking to people's needs. They're populists. And they're also point on, right? They know what people need. And the Democrats, so what are the Democrats? What's their prescription for getting on the other side of Trump? Well, let's get back to where we were before Trump. Oh, right. Let's reset the table to bring another Trump in. literally, that is what we're talking about, right?
That's a great point. That's exactly right. If you're going to talk about the great days before Trump, you're talking about the days that led to Trump, right? I mean, so that makes no sense. I just wanted to always try to keep the record straight. So I had mentioned I thought LaGuardia was a Democrat. He was not. He was a Republican. That had been in my mind. I mentioned my grandfather, who was a Republican, actually saw LaGuardia as a great mayor. He's been voted the greatest big city mayor in American history, but he was an odd duck of a Republican, and New York Republicans are often very strange. John Lindsay was a very liberal New York Republican mayor. That tradition kind of ended with Giuliani, and Bloomberg was a Republican, and he governed as a Republican, even though he ran as a Democrat and was elected as a Democratic mayor. So they flipped. But yeah, LaGuardia had many socialist tendencies. You see what it says there in Wikipedia, and an ideologically socialist member of the Republican Party. He was frequently cross-endorsed. So that type of politics, even if it's not nominally a Democrat, Chuck, is popular. That wins. That's how you win. And the Democrats seem to not want to win, or at least not want to win enough to buck their donors.
Yeah. So my headspace is focused on, we've talked about this a little bit, building out a strategy to get us to movement politics, mass movement politics, getting us to 7-8% of the population mobilized. We're right at about 1.5%, if my numbers are correct. So the number of people who participated in the Hands Off campaign, and then the No Kings rally, and then more recently the John Lewis event. And I think there's another one coming up. There's a moral something event coming up toward the end of August. But it's about 1.5%. We're going to need to quadruple that number, I believe, in order to get the kinds of numbers in the streets, as well as we talked about economic power, right? The consumer power, to bring all of that collectively together. And then that 6, 7, 8% of the population needs to be backed up by another 5 to 10% in terms of, giving people solidarity housing, meals, support, bail them out of jail if it comes to that, filling the jails. That was one of the strategies of the civil rights movement, which was so effective. And the other thing is that our movement politics need to embrace more a socially conscious religious people from traditional religions who share our values. The politics of the left right now are I believe, too secular and too exclusive, too anti-religious. I think it's really, really important that we learn from the civil rights movement and understand that without the a lot of the mainline Protestant churches, a lot of Jews, a lot of Black Catholics, Baptists, you name it, that was the Civil Rights Coalition, as well as those who were identified as intellectuals, artists, secularists, what have you. But it was a broad-based coalition. We don't have that politics yet. That's what we have to strive for. We have to get really, really big numbers. I'm not looking for the Democrats to lead it all. I just don't. I don't see that they have the chops, that they've got the commitment. There are a handful of them that I look to. But
that's I'm going to cut you off there. That's a strong language from you. You have in the past never been a defender exactly of the Democratic Party, but this is the most negative I've heard you, Chuck, when you talk about that party.
Their refusal, this is really what's tipped me hardest, is their refusal to call out, we've said it several times today, but the refusal to call out the fascism for what it is. If you don't see it today, you are really lost. Excuse me if I'm offending any of your viewers. And if you don't see the genocide, you're really lost. You're just not seeing the reality of the world. That may sound harsh, but for these professional politicians to not do that is either disingenuous, or they are so afraid of the donor class that they can't even see straight. And so many of them, as you know, they look at their elections, they look at their campaigns, and then they look at a corporate gig on the other side where they're going to be a paid lobbyist. More than 500 former members of Congress are paid lobbyists, where they make up north of $1 million, where they, multiples of their current salary. That's where so many of them are pointed, and they don't want to offend their future employers.
Yeah, this is the exact point I made in yesterday's program, that the Democrats are putting the Democratic electeds put their own self-interest above those of their constituents. I think they put their own self-interest above the interest of the party writ large, even, because it would be in the party's best interest if they were unified for working people, but they're not. We wanted to get Chuck. I wanted Chuck so badly to talk about DC. I promise we'll get there, but we've got sort of sidetracked into what I think is an incredibly important conversation. You said you don't trust the Democrats to lead this movement. Let me play this clip. I wanted your take on this. This is from Breaking Point's Crystal Ball here. I want your reaction to what she has to say.
Just this one word, then it's an indicator of who you really are and how committed you really are to being clear, being forceful, having that moral clarity. But, we'll see.
Look, we'll see
how it all plays out here. But I know there's going to be someone, because the lane is wide open, someone who fully occupies that sort of like Zoran lane and is truly like anti-Zionist, says we should arrest Netanyahu and we're cutting off all the weapons, not just like, the offensive ones and the defensive ones, blah, blah, blah. There is going to be a lane wide open for that person. There will be someone who will occupy that lane, and I think they will get significant support. It will be, and it will push everybody else on the issue as well.
I wouldn't deny that. I think that certainly will happen. I would look at it as an Overton window pusher and somebody who will definitely kind of be looked at as a pain in the ass or anything. Do I think that person's going to win solely on that? No. And I don't think that's why Zoran won either. I don't think it's the only reason he won, at least.
All right. So they're talking obviously about a Democrat in 28 who's going to run for president and will occupy what they call the Zoran lane, will call what Israel's doing genocide. That was before the clip I played. And even the conservative there, Sagar, said it's not the only reason, right, that Zoran spoke out against Israel much more forcefully than any other candidate. He says, well, that wasn't the only reason, but he does acknowledge, he says, yeah, but that's part of it. That had a lot of appeal. Do you think their crystal ball's right that there will be a Democrat who will emerge as a pro-peace, pro-life Democrat? And I use pro-life not in the sense of anti-choice, but in the sense of trying to preserve and enhance the quality of lives around the world.
100%. I've been thinking that along these lines. Really, this has been my turn. Being here in DC these last 2 years, working in support of Rep. Khanna, Ro Khanna carrying our state-based universal health care bill. We can talk about health care a little bit later, and recruiting Senator Ed Markey, and also recruiting a state legislative leader who really is bold. I mean, she sees it. And all of the state reps that she recruited for a press conference back on July 15th, they all see the genocide. They all see the fascism. What's wrong with these people in the Puzzle Palace in Washington, D.C.? What's wrong with them? I mean, what, is it the Potomac fever? What are they drinking? Honestly, it's astonishing to me. And I have, this is going to get out there, but, I've said to Ro Khanna, even when this is shortly after October 7th, right? This is after the Hamas attack on Israel, and then suddenly this thing turns into a monstrous war. And I leaned on him for 3 weeks. His office was occupied. Khanna's office was occupied before he signed on with the ceasefire. Because I said, you're on the wrong side of history. You need to get on board with the ceasefire immediately. And I have since said to him also, because I write extensively, this is my academic background, understanding what fascism is. Read this document. Read what I've written here. You really need to. And he's replied to me. He says, oh, yes, I will. But I never hear any more from him. And I've also said to him, you've got to call out the genocide for what it is. Really. So I agree. I agree with Crystal Ball and that, I don't think Bernie goes far enough. The Fight the Oligarchs tour. Okay. Yeah, of course. Oligarchs. But are you connecting all the dots here? He and AOC, they're not going far enough. I'm not going to be harsh on him because at least he's out there. Right. He's calling out the billionaire class, but he's got to lean all the way in and help us understand what the billionaire class is doing is they're fueling the fascism. They're fueling the takeover. They're fueling the takedown of democracy. They're fueling the takedown of the world. They're fueling these wars across the world, and they're profiting off of it. This is insane. You've got to go that extra step, and he's not gone there yet. Much as I love Bernie.
Could you see yourself voting for a Green in 28? I mean, what Crystal Ball was saying is there's going to be a Democrat emerge, and I hope that happens, and maybe it could be a Summer Lee. I don't think she's ever indicated she's running for president. I'm not sure who else we could really see. AOC, I have been honestly very disappointed in AOC. I'm not sure, Mamdani, we've seen mayors of the city of New York run for president. I don't know if I guess maybe Chester Arthur or something became president. I'm not sure if he was the mayor, but I don't know who that Democrat is, that lefty is on the Democratic side. That's my concern.
Yeah, I mean, so far among the people who have sort of made it pretty clear that they're running, right? I mean, we're talking about Newsom, Gavin Newsom, J.D. Pritzker, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro among governors, and also what's his
Wes Moore, maybe
Kentucky.
Wes Moore's the governor of Maryland, and Andy Beshear, who's somewhat more populist, or at least presents as more populist. And I think it's fair to say he is in Kentucky. And then, Pete, right? So-called Mayor Pete.
Right, Mayor Pete. Yeah, he's sort of dabbling a little bit with some of this more populist language, but I don't have a high regard for him. I mean, I see him as very calculating, but that's just me. But I don't know. I don't think I'm alone.
I don't think it's just you. I think it's a lot of people.
But the other cautionary I want to throw up here, Hal, is I'm not sure we're going to even see an election in 2026, let alone 2028, honestly. Because the fundamental tenet of fascism that everybody needs to understand is that fascism does not yield power without a scorched earth fight. I mean, this is Trump. Trump is not just throwing around rhetoric here when he talks about stopping mail-in balloting, electronic balloting. I mean, look at SAVE Act, excuse me. If people aren't familiar with the SAVE Act, you familiar with this one?
Save America Voting or something, but that was
what it is.
Go ahead.
Fundamentally, it requires women who show up at the polls to prove they are who they are, because a lot of them changed their name when they got married. So are you Smith or are you Jones? And if you can't prove who you are in the present, you can be blocked from voting. This is another voter suppression technique. This is a bill that Congress has passed called the SAVE Act. We should probably talk about this. Bookmark that one. Honestly, it's an important conversation. It's part of it's part of the bag of tricks by the Republicans. And harsh as we are here on the Democrats, we need to call out the Republicans too. I mean, let's say.
Oh yeah, no question. I think what my point is about the Democrats is who will fight them? Who will take on fascism? Do we have that person? Because the underlying assumption is the Republicans are enemies of freedom, enemies of democracy, enemies of peace. Who on the Democratic side will fight them, and we'll fight for those, because let's face it, not all Democrats are friends of peace. Our friend, we haven't seen that from them either. So, but that's the issue. Yeah, I'll look up the SAVE Act, Chuck. Let's get to your city. Oh yeah, go ahead, finish off.
Just to say that it's not idle speech when Donald Trump goes out on the campaign hustings last year and says, "Vote for me this election; it'll be the last vote you have to cast." That you'll ever have to cast.
Yeah, he did make that.
He's signaling very clearly, this is Hitler's playbook. This really is. I mean, Stephen Miller, his advisors, these people are all in with the fascist dictatorship. And complicated as the Ukraine question is, we talked about a bit earlier, I really do see him and Putin and Xi literally carving up the world. And Trump is doing it because he wants real estate deals. He wants Greenland. He wants Canada. He wants Panama. He's made no bones about it. He's said it out now. And he wants Gaza. He wants the Riviera on the Mediterranean. So
there's definitely 1984 vibe to this, with just mega powers that cut up the world. Like you had East Asia, Eurasia, and
absolutely
Oceania, and it was it was kind of almost a performative or kabuki type theater. The wars between them at some point became
Yeah,
faith.
it's like the Axis powers. They want to get it right this time, right? The Axis powers from World War II. This is a new form of the Axis powers, U.S., China, and Russia. That's how I see it.
Let's get to our nation's capital. Chuck is, in fact, in his home in D.C. I won't say the exact location, but not too far from some of those neighborhoods that Trump claims are so dangerous. So we'll talk about that. But first, this was quite a headline from the Bezos-owned newspaper. They say the city is dead. Business is down in the restaurants, where it's up in other places. We've got some video. What's the vibe, though? That's what the newspaper is saying. What are you seeing? What are you feeling as you go about your daily business in Washington, D.C., Chuck?
So I frequent almost every day it's a Ethiopian-run French cafe called Le Caprice here on 14th, just north of Monroe, where I live, and I've seen a dramatic drop off in the customers coming in there, and I've talked to the owner, and he's very alarmed. He's really alarmed, and I asked him about the tariffs and what's that's going to mean for his business, his bottom line. He said, "Well, I'm probably just going to have to I don't want to change the prices, so I'm going to just reduce the size of the." The sandwiches, we're just going to have to trim it back an inch or two or whatever. So he's very forthright with me. And I said, is there a drop off in business? He said, absolutely. And he's talking to his restaurant friends across the city. There's a significant Ethiopian population here in Columbia Heights and Adams Morgan and Mount Pleasant. And he said, we're all really alarmed that this occupation, this military occupation of the city is really putting a damper, because so much of the business are people who are coming in, commuters as well as tourists. Tourism is down, restaurant visitations are down, and it's alarming to say the least. And now not only are we getting hundreds of National Guard from Ohio, West Virginia, and South Carolina, but 3 more states overnight have said they're going to send National Guard into Washington, D.C. This is a city that is becoming thoroughly and totally a military occupied zone. It's scary. It's really scary and alarming for people. And people don't want to go out because they don't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, understandably, right? If you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's really bad. My sense as well, friends of mine who don't live in D.C., we're talking about, we don't want to go in there. We're not going to go there. And that's completely counter to what Trump is claiming, which is that there's more people going out. The city feels safer. You can see there, this is from NPR, 6 states now to send troops to D.C. I've always been somewhat of the mind that sometimes liberals, progressives play the identity politics card too often, claim that certain actions by Republicans are driven by racism or sexism, when I think they'd be better served, Democrats would be better served to argue that these policies just hurt us. They hurt working people. They hurt everyone. They're not targeting one group. But it seems to me that there's a very good, fair case to be made that D.C., famously called the Chocolate City by, I believe, Mayor Barry at one point, is being targeted by Republican states, in part because they can get away with going after a plurality black city, sending in their troops. These are all, as I said, Republican-led states. Can you imagine the uproar that I guess an Ohio governor would make, or a Texas? Well, it's not Texas. I don't know what, West Virginia. The outcry if a number of black police officers and National Guard from the district were suddenly patrolling their small towns. I don't think they would be. They would take that without enormous squawking and crying.
Oh, there's no question that there is a strong racial, anti-immigrant, anti-brown, anti-trans I mean, lean into all of it. Somebody, I think it was a Joseph Tallarico, who sort of emerged as the spokesperson from the Texas representatives, the Democrats, who left the state for 2 weeks in protest over that special session designed to gerrymander the state to grab 5 more seats, right? Joseph Tallarico, really interesting guy. He said, you know, what's happening in our society is we're targeting the wrong 1%. You know, the trans make up 1%. Right, immigrants make up 1%. These minority populations, they're not the ones who are causing prices to go up, democracy to decline, wars to be perpetuated. It's the 1% billionaire class. That's what we need to be targeting. That's where the real problem is. But what the billionaire class has been able to do is to get us fighting amongst ourselves and dividing us into these bogus culture wars, as if trans people are an existential threat to our society, right? It's so absurd, and yet so many people buy it because they're freaked out, because that's what they hear again and again and again and again. It's like, how threatening is this trans thing that's going on? So I don't know if I've answered your question here, but, you know, Washington, D.C. is an easy target, to your point, even though there's no evidence that there's a rise in crime here. I mean, I feel safe on the streets, and I'm walking in, again, 2 of the most heavily militarily ICE occupied areas of the city, Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant, as well as Adams Morgan. That's where I am every day. I walk these streets, and I went over to Mount Pleasant. There's a little city park over there, and I saw ICE agents. They're ripping down signs. They're pulling people off of buses. They're pulling people out of restaurants. And there's a lot of video and pictures of this. I mean, I've taken my own pictures of just ICE officers just sort of standing around waiting for an opportunity. That's all I've been able to personally witness. But I know that there's a lot of footage out there of people being grabbed. There was there were ICE agents who were chasing after somebody who hopped one of the turnstiles at the metro at Columbia Heights, and they went after this guy. And then the city residents chased after the ICE people, and they chased the ICE people out of the metro. So there was a pushback, which is great. And that needs to happen more and more. But, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we're really talking about. And these guys, you know, they're undercover. They're not identified. They're not wearing a badge. They're not wearing a name tag. They're not wearing anything that would quickly identify who they are. But, you know, when you see in Mount Pleasant a cluster of 5, probably in their 30s and 40s black men, which you never, ever, ever see. I walked through that town. I walked through that part of the city for 2 years. Never do you see that kind of a gathering of black men right there. Hispanic men, absolutely. You know, other local residents, absolutely. Kids, parents, babies. But people are afraid to go in the park. They're afraid to go in the restaurants for understandable reasons. They're afraid to ride the buses. They're afraid to go to childcare. They're afraid to go to report to work. They're afraid to go to churches. They're afraid to go to birthday celebrations. The city is petrified right now, and it's only getting worse.
Well, you can see that violent crime, specifically the murder rate, has dropped 2 consecutive years. And that belies Trump's insistence that he's responding to some crime wave. DC has its crime problems. There's no question. There's no argument. I looked at this site. It seems credible by this man named Michael Lloyd. He lists the 20 most murderous cities in America, and DC comes in 19th. It was higher, but the past couple of years, let me see if I can get this. I highlighted it. Is the 19th most, and it's far less violent. I don't know if you can read that, but the murder rate by far the highest is St. Louis. You're not seeing, I don't know if you can read that, Chuck. I'm sorry, it's a little bit faded, but I'll try to explain. St. Louis at 69 murders per 100,000. That's very, very high. DC is about 1/4 of that at 17. It's the 19th most dangerous. A lot of red state cities in there. There's no movement afoot to occupy them, including, of course, St. Louis, the most dangerous. Baltimore, also a very dangerous city. New Orleans, Detroit, Cleveland and so on. So it seems clear this is a pretext. I think part of it is Trump's aesthetics. He doesn't like to see homeless people on the street. It's also but you can round them up and then you put them, out in the field somewhere. They're still homeless. Their lives are even worse. There doesn't appear to be any commitment to making life better for the people who are struggling in our society. If anything, these actions only make things worse.
And the trigger for this was a single incident, right? It was two 15-year-old young black teens who assaulted Big Balls, one of the 19-year-old Doge operatives, at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, if you're going to ruin the city at 3 o'clock in the morning, you are begging for trouble. You're not just asking for it.
I'm not gonna endorse that view. I mean, people don't get a pass to attack you because you're out in the middle of of the night. I mean,
several cities, East, West, Midwest. And you just really, you're asking for trouble.
It's dangerous. I agree.
Almost anywhere.
It's dangerous, but I don't know that. It almost sounded to me from the way you said it, he sort of brought it on himself. I can't agree with that. I'm not going to blame the victim. I've heard some talk. There was apparently some people questioning whether it really happened. Right? Was this some sort of a false flag event? I don't know that. I believe that has been there. There's no allegation. There's no evidence to support that, and that's my sense as well. But I've heard that.
So what Trump did is he pivoted off of that and said that it's necessary that we keep safe our federal workers. Really?
Yeah, but which he's sliced to the bone.
Workers? What has Doge done to our federal workers? It's wiped them out. It's driven them out of the city. It's wiped them out. They've lost their careers. We've lost incredibly talented civil servants who are scientists, who are doing the really important work protecting consumers, transportation. I mean, you name it, just about every sector of our society designed to be protected by a career civil service has been virtually wiped out. And he turns around and says that this is about protecting federal workers. He actually said that. That's the most astonishing thing. But anyway.
Yeah, there's no concern for the Fed workers in this administration. What do you want? I mean, we talked about the power of the consumer. We talked about voting. Any final, because we're up past the end of the hour. I try to keep these shows to 1 hour. Let me just play this clip real quick, with respect to the situation in DC, because I thought Fox did a pretty good job here juxtaposing what Trump said and then with what the reality is. So he's going to claim here, I guess, that business is up, which it most certainly is not. And I think that dishonesty is also obviously a big problem. We talk about that too, but here we go.
But the press says he's a dictator. He's trying to take over. No, all I want is security for our people. But people that haven't gone out to dinner in Washington, D.C. in 2 years are going out to dinner. And the restaurants the last 2 days were busier than they've been in a long time. Thank you.
All right, so he's arguing, he's saying, hey, I'm doing this for security reasons. We just saw the city has actually gotten safer over the past couple of years, starting from well before he became president. He's also saying how busy the restaurants are. So here's how Fox responds to that claim.
Now take a look at this data from OpenTable, the online reservation system. According to them, online reservations are down in D.C. since last Monday, anywhere from 16% to 31% per day.
And let me just stop at the headline. There is business impact of D.C. takeover. What restaurant owner said D.C. is dying as a result. Restaurant sales are way down, according to OpenTable, as reported by Fox. And we'll just play a little more here.
And it shows cities like New York, Miami, Houston, they're all trending up. We know restaurants in the district have been dealing with so many factors playing into decreased foot traffic lately. Rising rents, Initiative 82, higher cost of goods, and federal worker layoffs, just to name a few.
So I want to stop it there because they make the point in that
if you're still using
that other cities like New York, Miami, Houston have all seen more business for their restaurants. Business is trending up in those cities. And then they identify some problems that DC faces, including higher prices. Well, higher prices are a problem in every city. That's not just DC. That's not limited. They also talk about the federal layoffs. That's had a very significant negative effect for sure on DC. And this, the specter of federal officers patrolling the streets is obviously very intimidating. It makes people feel less safe rather than more so. They're not going to DC. It's that simple.
Right. Yeah. And the perception, especially like you said, from the suburbs or from potential visitors to the city is alarming because they don't have the comfort zone that I do, because I know the streets. People recognize me. I frequent stores and restaurants and what have you, and I just know the terrain. I know how to walk. And if you walk with any hesitancy on the street, you become a target. You do. This is part of what it means to live in a city. You have to carry yourself with confidence. So the last thing I might just say is that I went to the Nats game on Sunday, to see my Phillies, and the announced attendance was 26,000. There couldn't have been 10,000 in the park. It was really, I've never seen that park so empty. And they may have sold more tickets. That may have been this ticket sale, but people weren't showing up.
The team is awful. They're really bad. So that's a big factor too.
They had taken 2 of 3 from their rival Phillies, and probably about half the fans were from Philadelphia or Philadelphia fans anyway. But I'm just saying that. Well,
that's a good point because the Phillies are good. The Phillies have Bryce Harper, former Nat, and I'm sure the crowd is way down. My son was at one of those games. He may have been at the one you were at. I'm not sure. He said it was ridiculous. He said you see these federal agents everywhere roaming around, and it definitely is a intimidation factor there.
Yeah.
Do you think it's making the streets safer? I'm just curious because you mentioned. I mean, I don't know how to respond to that. Are they targeting high crime areas? My sense was it was basically tourist areas like the mall. But where you live is closer to some higher crime areas. Are they, do you think, trying to protect residents?
They're trying to protect themselves. This is what's actually happening with these federal employees, these ICE employees, is that there's a real morale problem. I was witness to this last week. I can share this between Park Street and this is on 14th. This is the heaviest, most concentrated shopping area on 14th Street. And it's that area from Park Street south. The one block was shut off. Literally no traffic was getting through. There were 3 cop cars on either end, and there were 9 cop cars in the middle, just clearing the streets in order to make, as far as I could tell, because I hung around for half an hour to watch this, to make one arrest of one black man who was laying on the sidewalk, like he wasn't resisting, he wasn't doing anything that I could tell at that time. And it took, I don't know how many cops were involved there. We're talking 15 cop cars, we'll just say 2 cops for each cop, each car, 30 cops to make a single arrest, 30 policemen to make a single arrest. It wasn't to make the arrest, it was to protect themselves. I'm sure of it. And and they're very defensive, and trying to put myself in their shoes, I would be defensive too. Putting myself in their shoes, and we're being asked to patrol a city that's not going through anything approaching a crime wave. I mean, this city has seen really bad times. Go back to the King assassination of 1968. That was a critical time, and most American cities went up in flames, right? This is so far from that scenario, and yet that's the picture, the hellscape that Trump has always portrayed about cities, right? And he travels around the country and he says, your community's pretty safe, but just 30 miles down the road, that place is on fire. He's been able to scare people. Trump has been able to play the fear card very effectively and turning white people in particular against non-white people, Christians against non-Christians. And this is the fascist playbook. And it's unfortunately, it's very effective. But on the other hand, as the economy continues to sink, and Trump, of course, replaced the statistician over at the labor Bureau of Labor Statistics. He doesn't want the numbers to get out. So again, it's all about propaganda. It's all about lying. It's all about gaslighting. It's all about consolidating power. And we, as people who are alert and recognize the genocide, recognize the fascism, we need to collectively pull our strategy and our ideas and ourselves together to use our purchasing power as well as our activism in a strategic way that's not yet happening. That's where I think the next conversation needs to go.
All right, Chuck. So before we let you go, we are over the hour, but I want to continue for just a little bit longer with you. Your lower third there identifies 3 websites, and let's just focus for the last segment here on the one-payer states site. That is an organization that you're a co-founder of and president of as well. Right. How is the fight going, if at all, for one-payer healthcare, universal healthcare for all?
There's no way to sugarcoat it. We're in retreat. You know, the big ugly bill that passed, HR1, devastating to Medicaid recipients and not getting near as much attention as it needs. It's going to be devastating for Medicare recipients, especially post midterm election, assuming we have an election. That's going to be devastating. And they're also coming after Social Security. Maybe a good indicator, a good story is Wendell Potter, who's the insurance industry whistleblower. He was communications director with Cigna, had a crisis of conscience, left the industry. He now lives in Philadelphia with his work partner. They went and visited what's called a RAM site. This is Remote Access Medical. It's basically Doctors Without Borders. These are doctors who volunteer their time to get medical care to people who don't have adequate insurance or have no insurance. And they said the lines for people trying to get care was wrapped around the block. People had been there since the middle of the morning in Philadelphia. The remote access medical is not designed to go into inner cities. It's designed to treat people in areas where there are no hospitals in rural America. Well, guess what? Hospitals are disappearing in inner cities because of these predatory what do they call these firms that buy up these hospitals, and then when their investments
private equity.
Yeah, when their investments go bad across the world, they suck the resources out of that local hospital to compensate for their bad investments across the world.
So do you see, though, and one of the things we've discussed is, and obviously on the federal level, this is a non-starter, but how about on the state level? Do you see any movement where maybe a state like maybe Pennsylvania or California or New York could conceivably enact single-payer health coverage, one-payer coverage? Yeah,
so our theory of change and our plan, right, is to get a pro-healthcare president elected in 2028, right? Somebody who supports universal healthcare, that's our goal. And to get a House of Representatives elected that is pro-universal healthcare and a Senate that's pro-universal healthcare. And at a minimum, we want to get the State-Based Universal Healthcare Act passed in 2029, because right at that moment, there are a number of states. I count up to 6 to 8 states, including California, Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, New York, Maine, and others, potentially Massachusetts. Pennsylvania is a little behind. But nonetheless, this legislation, as we talked about in this program before, the State-Based Universal Healthcare Act, is designed designed for states to bring the federal healthcare dollars back to the states so they can create a robust single-payer system or one-payer system to provide excellent healthcare, cradle-to-grave healthcare for all of the citizens within that state. And as you know, and most of your listeners know, that's how Canada was able to get to national healthcare, was through a single province, Saskatchewan. So our theory of change is we can get this done at the state level, but Congress has a role to play, and we need to get that done in 2029 as these other states are going across the finish line, creating their own universal healthcare models, systems. So I'm radically hopeful that that's going to happen. and that we fight in the meantime to make sure that we get to that point. But we've got to beat the fascism. We've got to beat the, what's happening across the globe, and we need to connect to others across the globe. I'm going to be leaning more and more into organizing among and between people, in fact, who are fighting fascism across the globe. So,
well, keep us. We'll definitely have you back as soon as possible, Chuck. But keep us posted. That's something I'm really, really interested in. Sort of international, multinational movement for workers, for healthcare consumers, for peace.
Yeah, for students, you name it. I mean, it's a coalition. Yeah, absolutely. As well as religious folk, who share our values. It's another important component here, as well as, medical professionals who really are desperate to do their job and care for people. Thank you, bro.
Yeah, no question. Always great to talk to you, Chuck. Any final word before we let you go? I didn't really talk much about my my thumbnail here, but I spent a little time, and I'm kind of proud of that little Trump thumb knifes DC there. You can see the wound. I think it's fair. I think it's accurate based on that headline. But anything you wanted to talk about, either the situation in DC or healthcare wise, or one of your other groups, Justice for All, American Fascists, we touched on that for sure.
The anti-fascism stuff. Yeah, I think really learning, understanding. There's an article that I would ask people to take a look at. It's called Fascism 101, and the subtitle of which is "See It, Say It, Define It, Defeat It." And really, it's about coming to terms with what it is that we're dealing with Trump and Putin and Netanyahu and Xi and other authoritarian leaders across the globe, understanding what they're up to and how it's all being it's all being funded by the global billionaire class. There are about 3,000 billionaires in the world, 3,000. About 900 are here in the United States. And these are the folks who are literally buying up our institutions, and they're radically privatizing them, and they're monetizing them. They're making money off of what was the public space, the public good, the common, the common welfare, parking meters, hospitals, schools. They're milking it all for themselves, just padding their pockets deeper and deeper and deeper. And this is what's fueling the fascism. People need to understand that and see that. And we've got to figure out how to take down the billionaire class, because unless we do, we're in a gilded age again, 2.0 on steroids, and we've got to figure this out. Absolutely. And it all revolves around, the healthcare fight, the justice fight, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Chuck Pennacchio, thank you so much for joining us on Halitics. It is Wednesday. I will be back tomorrow. Thank you so much for being part of Halitics.